what happened and then what happened. That's not what we are interested right here, right now. A little bit is okay, but what you really want to know from them, what is it that they recollect? What can they recollect from last week's class? Okay, so generally they will recollect only those things that really made an impact in them on them, right? So it could be a lot of them will speak on the points of discussion rather than the story, because something really hit them, like really affected them. So they'll talk about that, and you say yes, yes, and then you can expand by adding on a couple lines about that, and then you move on to the next child, and you may say, and very soon, as 3 or 4 children speak, their recollection from last week, you realize that actually you have the entire summary of what you did last time. And it becomes a very easy way for the teacher, rather than preparing ahead of time and thinking, okay, now I better start out with a summary of what we did. And that takes a lot of time and effort. No, let the children do that work, and they will come up and they will naturally add, say a little bit also about the story as to what happened and everything, and you allow them, and you try to make it short, because for every child, so that the more children you get to participate is nicer. So you don't allow, a child may have a tendency to speak and speak and speak, so you develop that expertise where where you don't allow that, and you say, and in a very nice and positive way, and then you move on to the next child. Okay, and try to give, now all of them won't come up with their points that they remember. Just a few will come. That's okay. So the teacher gets a good idea. Okay, these are the children who spoke up, so that when the next time comes around for getting them to say something, who are the ones who are shy, that need to be drawn out, that need to speak. So you kind of catch them at that point, at another point. Okay, so very soon, so the summary is done. What you did in the last week's class, easy, right? No problem. So your work has become easy, and it's become very interesting suddenly, right? So now we go, and then we say, okay, and then you can speak a little bit at that point, and kind of sum up if you like, but don't make it too long, because just enough to bring the whole story together, so that they can understand what's going to happen now. Okay, what's going to happen now. So just so they can connect, that much is important. That's necessary, so they can understand what the flow of the story is. Okay, so we'll begin from text 15. So obviously, right before this, not much has happened, because you began from probably text 8 or something, so you've barely done like 7 verses, so there's not much that has happened, but quite important things to have happened, right? Where Dhruva is trying to go on the lap of his father, and his father is ignoring him, because because he wants to favor his wife Suruchi, and Dhruva is very, very hurt, extremely hurt, and he goes running, especially when he sees his father also ignore that aspect. Then he just, he loses his school. He's a Kshatriya, we heard all that. He's Kshatriya by nature, and he goes crying to his mother, and his mother is very, very disturbed, but there's not much she's able to do. Right? Well, no, we just read that, yeah, in text 14. So now we go on to text 15. And like I said, the next 15 verses are really where the real philosophy is, right? A lot of discussion here. So I think you picked out the right verses in terms of how many verses. I don't think you'll be able to go past that. Maybe you may, depending on the discussion. Okay. So when Dhruva Maharaj reached his mother, his lips were trembling in anger, and he was crying very grievously. Queen Suniti immediately lifted her son onto her lap, while the palace residents, who had heard all the harsh words of Suruchi, related everything in detail. Thus Suniti also became greatly aggrieved. So, Vaikunt Vilasini,
Yes, Mataji. Yes, Mataji.
No, can you read the next verse, please?
Okay.
Yeah.
This incident was unbearable to Suniti's patience. She began to burn as if in the forest fire, and in her grief she became just like a burnt leaf, and so lamented. As she remembered the words of her co-wife, her bright, lotus-like face filled with tears, and thus she spoke.
Mhm. Yeah. So next one, Radha Chandrika Mataji. Yeah.
Yes, Mataji. She also was breathing very heavily, and she did not know the factual remedy for the painful situation. Not finding any remedy, she said to her son, "My dear son, don't wish for anything inauspicious for others. Anyone who inflicts pains upon others suffers himself from that pain."
So what is something that you can discuss from this? Hmm? From this verse? Any ideas?
I got the thought like Newton's third law, like every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Yes. Yes. Karma, right? What goes around comes around. So whatever we do to somebody comes back, right? And so you can expand that. Now you're dealing with two of you are dealing with older children, right? Children who are more mature. So you can go deeper naturally. So one thing that you can discuss here is that when we first of all when we inflict pain, and sometimes we do it accidentally or we do it even purposely without thinking, and especially children, they can do that easily, right? They can do something, bully somebody. So what do you do with that? What do you do? So you can introduce the idea of saying what it means to say sorry, you know so dealing with that situation when we've hurt somebody, obviously Suruchi didn't do that here, right? She didn't realize at this point what she's done. But what would somebody who's more intelligent would do is to say sorry. But then what kind of sorry do we say? Do we just say sorry and walk away? Is that really being sorry? Or what does it actually mean to be sorry? Of course, children will give a few of their ideas, and they may come up with some very nice ideas, like, okay, well, we go and maybe touch the feet of that devotee, maybe go and serve that devotee, right? So many other ways of saying sorry. And that's a lot better than just walking away with the word sorry. Right? So, being really sorry means to actually experience empathy, which means going into that person's shoes and actually realizing what that person has felt. That is really being sorry. Right? And we see that later in the case of Uttanapad, right? In the same chapter, we're going to hear that he is an example of someone who actually really feels sorry, and he empathizes with that situation because he leaves his kingdom and day and night he's regretting, lamenting as to what he did, and thinking about his dear Dhruva and how poorly he has behaved, how poorly he forgot his religious principles as a king, right? So that's the meaning of feeling really bad and sorry. So creating in our children this idea that what does it mean when we inflict pain to somebody? Really letting them go deep. And this really hits home to them. Later on, when the entire section finishes and you have a realizations class, they'll come up. Or even, no, I used to do a realizations class after each chapter. So when they come up, because otherwise they'll forget, right? So at least after each chapter. So then they'll come up with this thing, I shouldn't give pain to others,
Sorry to
because,
interrupt. I'm
huh?
sorry. So
Yeah.
the realizations have to be done after every class, in the end of the class, every class, or after every chapter.
Well, it depends, if you have a very big group, but if you can, it's wonderful. It's actually nice if you can have after every class, because especially this section is so deep, you want to draw out what the children have taken away. But sometimes time does not permit. So you have to feel it out. Okay, Brajbalavi, you have to actually feel it out and see what you want to do. There's no hard and fast rule for this. Okay?
Okay.
There's no hard and fast rule for it. I mean, you can, because not, when you have a realizations class, it's not like every child has to speak. It's nice if all of them speak. But if they cannot, that's okay, because there may be some children who just don't have anything to say. So we don't want to push them, right? But you want to remember them for next time. Okay. Or if you want to, the other way, like if you're taking like 2 turns to do this chapter, then you could do it at the end of the chapter because they won't really forget so much. Okay, so it depends. You have to really see. So here, so we do, we can investigate this, discuss this idea of saying sorry, and it really is very relevant to our children because this is what they do. They do something naughty and they walk away like sorry, and that's the end of it, right? So we're trying to cultivate them, that feeling in them of empathizing and also relating it to the story, that they will relate. Now, this point that you brought up, you bring it up when Uttanapad, you're dealing with this part of Uttanapad, bring it up and say, remind them, see, the reason why he did not get such heavy reactions, and Suruchi got heavy reactions, is because he was lamenting. He actually felt really sorry for what he did. That's why he didn't get. Krishna acknowledged that. He accepted that. So when we make a mistake, we really have to take pains to actually go out and apologize in deeper ways. For example, we can go and serve that devotee. That's another way, right? Do some service for that devotee. Right? Uttanapa's situation was different. Our situation is different. So you can bring it a little bit on the practical level because it is a practical subject. So you can bring it on that level. Not everything will come on that level, but this one can. So they can give ideas of how to say sorry to somebody. Okay, so that's one side, one part of this that can lead to this discussion. And then, yeah, and talking about karma, the way you can expand that is how when we give something, when we do something mean to somebody, you will get it back. So one has to keep rotating in this cycle of birth and death because one has to take another life where one is given that pain. Or it can happen in this life, of course, but it may fructify or sprout in our next life. And so our cycle of birth and death, because of our offensive behavior, because of the karma that we are collecting, it carries on. And we may end up with that same person in a different way who gives back that same karma to us, right? So this cycle never stops, and it's a very painful process. So we have to finish it up in this life. Okay, we've done something very serious, which we shouldn't have done. How do we work it out in a way that we don't continue this whole offense? Okay, so it's very important. This brings home the point how important it is. Offenses, how important it is not to commit offenses. And if we do offenses, how to take care of it. Okay, so that's an important point we instill in our children. Okay, so Raj Ballavi, if you have any questions, you can always interrupt me. So don't feel like you cannot say anything to me. Okay, so if you have any doubts or questions or even comments, or realizations, feel free to say something.
Mataji, I have a question regarding the 17th verse. Like
Uh-huh.
in that 17th verse, Suruchi's character also is being given so much like elevation, right? Because she is, as an ideal mother, she is telling him not to think of any bad.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
won't we touch that part?
yeah, yeah. It has, yeah. So she's a wonderful Vaishnavi, where she's saying, and that's the part that I would wait to read more, where you can see a deeper character of hers. Like there's a few other things that will happen, and then you can bring everything together and glorify Suniti and make the point that what a great Vaishnavi she was in comparison to Suruchi. What was Suruchi's problem? The way she acted, full of envy, and the way she acted. So you can bring a contrast. Remember I spoke in the seminar how Bhagwatam can be taught by contrast, isn't it?
Yes,
So,
true. I remember
yeah.
that.
And then that brings home the point very strong when you're comparing one person to another person. And that's in the story, itself, right? How Suniti was behaving and how Suruchi was behaving. What a big contrast, you know? I remember in the first 8 verses that you already read, I discussed with the children about the, what envy is. So we were already discussing in the first 8 verses that you already did. We were discussing very deeply the quality of envy, which Suruchi displayed. What does really envy mean? How envy can be in so many ways. I remember I read somewhere that the way envy is explained, that it can be by the body, mind, or words, right? So in Surichi's case, it was words. She was very, very harsh, right? And envy really means that you really want to harm that person. That is the difference between envy and jealousy. Jealousy is, when you're jealous of somebody, somebody's got a sports car that you don't have, right? And then you say, oh, I wish I had that car. That's jealousy. It's, yeah, it's not good, but it's harmless. Oh, I wish I had that too. But envy means you go and you puncture that tire of that person, or throw a rock at that car because you are so angry that person has a nice car. You want to harm that car and that person. You want to give pain to that person. And this is what Suruchi displayed. She actually was wishing Dhruva to be dead, right? And that is what we read in the last verses, right? How she's telling Dhruva, you have to take birth in my womb because I want you dead. So many. I mean, this Dhruva story is just unlimited. It's like questions, one lesson after another lesson after another lesson, right? So you can bring that up. You can bring that up, but remember to keep that in mind as a deeper topic later on. Okay, so it's not like you just wait till the end to discuss about Suniti's wonderful character being displayed there. No, you give that point, but you cannot go too deep because those other point, her character is still going to keep unfolding, right? And the contrast will come where you're contrasting with Suruchi. Is that clear, Brajavali?
Yes, Mati. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay. Now, as far as small children are concerned, for Dipeshwari, you have to treat it accordingly, where the children understand, even young children understand what it means. Yeah, what it means to be, mean. They all understand what it means to be mean and to be a bully. And,
Yes.
yeah, they can understand these concepts. It's just that they may not understand some deeper issues that we are discussing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But quite a bit. They
But I
actually are
think
not.
the last session we had a nice interaction with the kids because they were able to understand exactly like when I think we left off text 19 where
Yeah,
Suniti was telling to go and and pray to Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all the kids were already, I felt they're all Vaishnavis, because they're saying that like if they had any problem, the first thing they would do is go to pray to Krishna, and that's what their mother
mm,
told them. So at a very young age, they are aware of a lot of things,
yeah,
and they're very pure. If they want something, they'll go and ask Krishna. So they're
yeah,
like very, very
very innocent.
innocent. Very nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. This is so nice. This is so nice. Such a significant point they take away is that if you have a problem, go and talk to Krishna. You know, Krishna likes that kind of conversation. We are just toddlers in front of Krishna, and Krishna wants us to come in with our problems. He likes it. It's a very personal thing. If we were to just think that we are Mahabhagavats and we think, well, I can't ask anything from Krishna, then it becomes very impersonal because Krishna knows that we are not Mahabhagavats. We are like little children, who runs to a mother and says, I want this, I want that, right? But then gradually we learn how to reciprocate, how to also do something for Krishna. We're not that crying baby, but as the baby gets older, then he brings some gift for his mother or father, right? A little flower or something, and the mother and father become so happy. Wow, So the child learns, okay, not only do I ask, but I also give something back to Krishna. So children are so innocent, And for with younger children, you can go further on, you can go faster because obviously it goes faster. It's not the same pace. So if you have to, otherwise it's fine, whatever you're doing. It's working. If it's working, it's working. So yeah. So this is anything else? We can go on otherwise. Yeah. Braj Balabi, do you want to do text 18? Read 18, please.
Yes, Mataji.
Suniti said, "My dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Suruchi is so because the king, your father, does not consider me his wife or even his maid servant. He feels ashamed to accept me. Therefore, it is a fact that you have taken birth from the womb of an unfortunate woman, and by being fed from her breast, you have grown up."
Mm. So, some verses you don't have to stop at every verse. You can go on. But for the ones who are really older, the point that comes through in this verse is that she's she's considering herself very unfortunate, right? Neglected by the king. And but we see later on, just to keep that point in mind, later on we see that how glorious she becomes, even though she's the unfortunate queen of the king who's been neglected, right? So instead of pitying her, one is glorifying her. Suniti is a glorified mother of Dhruva, who also got to go back to Godhead, right? Such a great person, right? So her unfortunate situation did not limit her. So this is a deeper point with older children that you have, that no matter what circumstances Krishna gives us in life, as long as we are chaste to Krishna, as long as long as we don't forget him, and we go to him, and we are chaste to Krishna, then our position is never unfortunate. That's the point. It's never unfortunate, and it's a very deep point. And I've discussed this point with older children, teenagers, and older, also older. And it's a deep point for discussion, because so many people are faced with so many problems in life, right? Unfortunate situation. Of course, these are children; they may not have experienced all that, but it's good to think like that, at least, to understand that when people are, faced with different things, it's because, and they can actually, one need not pity them. In other words, one may think actually the other way around, that how fortunate that person is. If that person is a devotee, he's naturally going to get closer to Krishna. Quite a different way of seeing things, isn't it? Because we have a tendency to pity people, right? If they have some material difficulties. But what is fortunate, what is unfortunate is very clearly described here. Her unfortunate situation made her very, very fortunate, isn't it? So these are deeper points. And you can, accordingly, for younger children, you can naturally adapt it accordingly. It just takes a little bit of more creativity, and you just have to take. I don't do anything different in the sense that I just understand it the way I want to understand it, and then one has to simply present it in an expert way, in a way that's digestible for them. Basically, that's what it means. Okay, so now we can have Dipeshri. Would you like to read 19?
Yes, Mataji. My dear boy, whatever has been spoken by Surichi, your stepmother, although very harsh to hear, is factual. Therefore, if you desire at all to sit on the same throne as your stepbrother, Uttama, then give up your envious attitude and immediately try to execute the instructions of your stepmother. Without further delay, you must engage yourself in worshipping the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Another facet of her great saintly behavior, right?
Yes.
So in the earlier verse, she talked about not inflicting pain, and here she's saying, give up your envy. Give up your envy. That's the first step. You first have to give up your envy, because you cannot go to Krishna with an envious. I mean, he did go with a revengeful heart, but then in order to approach Krishna, one still has to be, you know, one has to have a soft heart, right? You actually cannot approach Krishna with a hard heart. The heart has to be melted, right? So that's why she's saying, give up your envy, and then you can try to execute the instructions of your stepmother. So in other words, when she says execute the instructions of your stepmother, she's taking something good out of somebody who's been very horrible, isn't it? She's finding good in that, in the worst situation. She's finding a good. And this is, again, exemplifies her wonderful character. And this is the nature of a devotee. He sees good even in a very horrible situation, right? And then the other point that comes here is that she's not telling Dhruva, she's not just crying there and lamenting and letting Dhruva lament in her lap and embracing only, but she's saying, do something about it. Get up and do something. Just don't cry or lament. I feel sorry, but what is the use of feeling sorry? You must go and engage yourself. So the point that comes through is mere lamentation is useless. One has to act on that. Actually, just lamenting means maya, because one doesn't have to endeavor. It's easy, right? It feels easy. Why should I work too hard to try to find a solution for this? I'll just cry. I'll just lament. So one feels humbled in a difficult situation. One feels humbled, depending on the mercy of the Lord. But at the same time, one feels more determined to do something about it. And this is what comes across in Dhruva's story. He's determined, right? And that becomes easier with his mother's advice. Right? Any point or question here? Okay, so we'll go with Vaikuntha Vilasa.
Yes. Suniti continued, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is so great that simply by worshipping his lotus feet, your great grandfather, Lord Brahma, acquired the necessary qualification to create this universe. Although he is unborn and is the chief of all living creatures, he is situated in that exalted post because of the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whom even great yogis worship by controlling the mind and regulating the life air prana.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think? What is the point that comes across here that you could discuss?
So, how Lord Brahma acquired the necessary qualification to create the universe by the mercy of Lord. So, Supreme Personality is the highest. This point can be discussed here, I think.
Okay. Yes. Anybody else? Yes.
Yeah, can I add, Mataji?
Yes, of course.
Like, what are the two things for attaining success?
Mm-hmm.
What are the two things that are being mentioned in this verse that help us in attaining success? One is endeavor from our side, another is mercy of the Supreme Lord.
Yes. Both points are wonderful. Yes. That's a point. How would you discuss that point, Radha Chandika Mataji? The point of endeavor and mercy. Do you have any examples?
Like practical example, or because Damodar Leela is perfect example, but
Yeah, that Leela. Right now, we're not going to talk about so much in putting them in a spot. Did you do that and did you do that? No, they get the point very well through stories. Okay, so here we talk about the Damodar Leela, right? Mother Yashoda's endeavor, but she still needed the kripa, the mercy, the two fingers, right? The rope was 2 fingers short. So one finger represented the endeavor.
another finger with mercy.
So, and they get fascinated with that. And first you ask them if they know that example. They try to challenge their own brain, their brain, right? Very good point. Okay.
And one more point, should I say?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, actually, Surichi pointed about his qualification, Dhruva's qualification. And
Mhm.
here, Suniti is also describing like Brahma's qualification. Brahma acquired the qualification. So,
Yes.
so this means for achieving anything, qualification is required, and this qualification is possible by mercy of Lord only. Means endeavors, all things are required, but at the same time, Supreme Personality's mercy is equally important.
Yes. Yes. Very good point. That even though Brahma worked so hard, he was doing penances and austerities for thousands of years, but still, until Krishna gave his mercy, he could not achieve, see anything, right? Get darshan, right? So ultimately, one is dependent on the Lord, which brings home the point of Braj Balavi, right? That ultimately is we are dependent on Krishna. He's the greatest. So all these 3 points are so wonderful that you all suggested. Yeah.
And one more to add to that is nothing is easily available. Like you have to put your endeavor. That part maybe for them, like
Yes.
uh, anything is not easily available. You have to put your hard work.
Yes.
That point also maybe we can stress. Like here, because why Suniti is giving the example of Brahma to Dhruva, so we
Mhm.
can take them forward in that way also.
Very good point. Because we can work, there's 2 points. We have to also show Krishna our sincerity by working for it. But then ultimately, we have to depend on Krishna. We have to pray because we can keep working very hard, but it's up to Krishna to give us the results, to give it any way he likes to. So both points can be emphasized that even though Arjuna was such a great warrior, but he always depended on Krishna for winning, right? It's not like, I mean, when he's starting to shoot the brahmastra, then first thing he does is circumambulate the Lord, instead of just shooting it right away. He remembers, no, without accepting Krishna's shelter, it's not going to work. Even in that hour of great desperation, and he remembered that, right? So this is devotee's mood, that no matter how good I am, but ultimately it's Krishna. And of course, and Krishna only gives his mercy when there's endeavor, when there's hard work, right? Just like Yashoda, she did that. The other point I was thinking could be emphasized is, well, it's coming up actually in the next one, the point of parampara, right? How she gives, the way she directs, um, develops that faith in Dhruva to approach Krishna for his problems, right? That look, your grandfather did the same thing, and your great grandfather also did that same thing. So she's establishing parampara, how we can really jump over, the parampara, how we have to be following, in the footsteps of greater devotees. So, and that becomes very convincing for Dhruva. Look, your great grandfather, Lord Brahma himself, he did the same thing. He pleased the Lord. Now you go and please the Lord. By your austerities and penance, he pleased the Lord. Now you also do some austerity and penance and please the Lord. Because your great grandfather did it. And not only did he do it, your grandfather also did it. It's a very important point that as devotees we want to follow in the footsteps of acharyas, right? We don't want to make up our own whimsical things. So that's another point that comes across in a couple of verses, in a few verses, and you can do that, in many ways. By parampara can be explained, through examples. If it's hard for children, the tree example. How do you take a ripe mango from a tree, from the top of the tree, right? Not by throwing a stone, because if you throw a stone, the mango will come, will crush when it falls down. But it's you hand it down to another person who's a little bit lower in the tree, and then another person, right? So you can show that if you want to make a visual, you can show that, or you can discuss that. the example of the mango on top of the tree. You know how we need to hear from parampara. You can expand or you can move on. So you have to remember there's so many lessons in Dhruva's story. So you can see what you want to discuss, what inspires you. It's not like the children will miss out. They're going to read it again one day, and then they're going to read it again one day, and each time they read there'll be fresher and newer meanings. So you don't have to give it all in one go. Sometimes we get too anxious, right? Because we have so many points and we want to bring home all the points, right? No, we don't have to worry about that. Okay, so next one is um, Radha Chandika, right? I think.
Yes, Mataji. Suniti informed her son, your grandfather Swayambhu Manu executed great sacrifices with distribution of charity, and thereby, with unflinching faith and devotion, he worshipped and satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By acting in that way, he achieved the greatest success in material happiness and afterwards achieved liberation, which is impossible to obtain by worshipping the demigods.
Hmm. Yeah. So this is what would you discuss in this?
Like for spiritual success or material success, any kind of success, we need to approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is one point. Uh, the ultimate aim is liberation. It's not. We shouldn't limit ourselves to just material success. We should
Mhm.
aim above for liberation as well. That's what I
Yeah.
am getting.
No, this is a very important point that we must go to the Lord, only to the Lord, not to the demigod. She says that very clearly, right in the last line. Don't go to the demigod.
Right, right. Yes.
She makes that point. So the point that can be discussed is the difference why we need to go to the Lord and not to the demigods over here, right? And so and then I one thing that really comes across and they really enjoy the class is when we ask them to give examples of other stories in the scriptures where a devotee went to the Lord with material desires. What example can you think of?
Dhruv Maharaj only is the example material desire.
Uh,
Yeah.
um, they Vamandev avatar or Aditi.
Aditi? Mm-hmm.
She wanted to. Indra has taken. Bali Maharaj has taken place of Indra, so
Mm-hmm.
she wanted that Lord should uh,
Yeah.
means do something to save Indra.
The children, the
Hmm.
demigods,
Hmm.
right? So she prayed to the Lord, and it was completely a material thing, right? And the Lord came and fulfilled her desire, and he became her child. Wonderful example. Yes. Any other example? What
Like
about the story? Huh? Go ahead.
Samudra Manthan also can be an example, right? For nectar, they are all trying. That is,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yes. And then there's the example of Kardam Muni, right? He wanted
Yes.
a wife. He wanted a wife. He was such a great personality, such a great yogi, but he had a material desire. And Krishna fulfilled that desire. He gave her a very nice wife. And he was purified of everything. And then he perfected his life. So we have other examples, and then that tickles their brain. They start thinking, wow, yeah, 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 like you all just did that, right? So they get to say. So use this methodology a lot, getting them to find stories in the Bhagavatam which is similar or opposite, contrast. Okay, so this
Mataji,
will get them going.
let's
Yes.
say something
Mhm.
because in Jagannath Leela, there are many Leelas like um, Mohanty, Bandhu Mohanty, Bandhu Mohanty story is there.
Mhm.
Even many like material, his wife, even Sudama's story is also means Sudama didn't come for wealth, but his wife sent him for wealth only. So
Yeah.
like these stories also we can include here.
Yeah. Well, I would stick to Bhagavatam or Chaitanya Charitamrita and not to other side stories, because then the discussion will get too long.
Okay.
And these are not very popular stories, so they will want to hear the whole story. They won't maybe be able to make sense of it till you tell them the whole thing, right? But these stories they've heard. Stories like Sudama is a great example. His wife, wanted, some relief from her poverty, right? Of course, Sudama didn't want anything. But how did Krishna reciprocate to that sincere desire? Amazing, right? So you want to stick to those stories that they're able to tell, they already know, so that you don't have to spend so long. I never tell them the whole story. I just touch on it and give them the main parts in case they don't know, in case they need elaboration. And if you tell them to tell the story of Sudama, they'll take 5 minutes, right? So you have to be very careful as to, you could allow them to tell, but keep it brief, what I'm saying. You can allow a child to say that, or you can emphasize real quickly. So you have to learn the art of how to keep moving, but at the same time, you want to get it deep, really get it deep. Okay. So it just requires some balancing, and it just goes by experience. The more you do it, you'll know, okay, am I being too bogged down here? Like it's going on and on and on. Because what will happen with children, they lose interest, they lose attention. You're going to lose them. So you have to be very careful. Okay, so you're asking them, give me example, quick. Okay, everybody's giving examples. They're active, they're happy, they're interacting, and you're just touching on them, touching on these topics enough where it makes the point, though. If you just leave it the way it is, then that also is not good, because you're emphasizing, see what Krishna did in this. He gave Sudama a whole palace. See what Krishna did in this. So you want to just emphasize those points, okay, but not too long. It just takes experience, it's really wonderful. Okay, so I think we've covered everything here, unless somebody has any other points.
So do we need to, here in this verse, do we need to tell about that unflinching faith and devotion? Right?
Okay.
What?
So the one thing I want to say, we've been discussing a lot of philosophy right now, but I have to remind you that with children, you have to bring it down to also to interaction and to stories, contrast other stories like we just did. Okay, so you don't want to discuss uh, a lot of deep things that normally in an adult class you would discuss naturally. You can take like 3 classes for this one verse, 3 hour, 3 times you can do this one verse, right? It's so deep, this verse, so many different aspects. You don't want to do that with children. No. The only reason we did some philosophy here is because they were crucial to understanding the story. Okay, things like envy, and we discussed, what else did we discuss? Parampara, a little bit of that, but we don't want to go too deep where they lose interest, right? And then how she's wishing pain and things like that. These are very relevant, very important. They are the foundation of trying to understand the story. Suniti's great behavior, great character, and Surichi, the way she was. So all these are important. So we have to discuss the philosophy in that interesting way. But then, as soon as you, like you suggested, go into that part, well, it gets too much. Then it's too much for them. Okay. So you discuss philosophy only to that extent that is crucial to the understanding of the story. But you don't want to go further into the depth like you would do in an adult class. Okay? Because that takes time. That takes more maturity, and also the children, you have to always remember how you have to keep that attraction. And you cannot see, maybe you're doing video, then at least you can see what's going on there, whether they're interested. But even though they may be showing their face, but they're somewhere else because you've lost them. They won't be there, you see. So you have to be really careful how to keep them going. And because when you ask them for these examples, the point is made, but yet they're interacting and also excited and also thinking, right? And it doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes you may have to speak quite a bit, but yet you know that they are listening. You should know that they are listening. Keep checking. Okay. 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 So let's see who. Now we have. Oh, I don't see. What's her name? Dipeshwari here.
Yes, Mataji, she left because she had,
Okay.
yeah, I think she messaged too. She wrote to me that she's taken care of.
So we have Vaikuntha. Would you like to read?
I didn't get you, Mataji. Shall I read the next one?
Vaikuntha. Is it whose turn is it?
Vaikuntha Lakshmi Mataji. हाँ, हाँ.
Yes, I'll read. My dear 22, my dear boy, you also should take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is very kind to his devotees. Persons seeking liberation from the cycle of birth and death always take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord in devotional service. Becoming purified by executing your allotted occupation, just situate the Supreme Personality of Godhead in your heart and without deviating for a moment, engage always in his service.
Yeah. So in this one, you can explain about how Krishna is kinder than a mother. A mother is considered very kind-hearted, right? He's got, she's willing to do it so much for the child, right? But here she's pointing out the fact that Krishna is kinder than millions of mothers. I mean, look at her chastity, isn't it amazing? Instead of smothering the child with all her love and saying that, oh, I'll protect you, or I'll don't worry, child, I'll take care of this, not to worry. And this is how generally people will respond, right? She's saying, no, 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 no. I actually cannot do anything for you. You have to take shelter of the Lord, who's kinder. And at this point, I will read. I will, because it's such a beautiful part in the purport, I will read to them that purport. What is that purport I will read? Suniti is saying, um, she's telling Dhruva, you came to me crying, having been insulted by your stepmother, but I'm unable to do any good for you. But Krishna is so kind to his devotees that if you go to him, then the combined kindness of millions of mothers like me will be surpassed by his affectionate and tender dealings. So beautiful, right? How she's building that faith in him. See what she's doing as a mother, she's building that faith. She's not the center. She's not making herself the center of his existence. She's making Krishna the center of existence. And this is building the faith in the child that we are all imperfect, we are all helpless, in front of Krishna. Okay? Of course, the child still thinks wonderful things about his parents. They are the most, wonderful people for him, right? We know that. But yet, the parents are establishing that, just like Narad Muni, when he went to Brahma and said, I thought you were God, you're the supreme, but I see that you are meditating on somebody. Brahma said, oh, I'm not the supreme, right? So that's the point. So
Yeah.
he built that faith in Narad Muni that look, it's not me, but so this is what Suruchi is doing. Okay, so I think we're getting quite late now for all of you, and we can probably do. I want to stop at 24 because generally that's what I would do. Okay, because one section is finished after that. After that, Narad Muni starts, right? So you try to divide your sections accordingly. Try to do that way. Okay. So the scene changes completely after that, as you notice. So we
Yeah.
stop there. So two more verses and we stop after that. So we can do with Radha Chandrika Mataji. You want to read the next one quickly?
My dear Dhruva, as far as I am concerned, I do not find anyone who can mitigate your distress but the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose eyes are like lotus petals. Many demigods, such as Lord Brahma, seek the pleasure of the goddess of fortune. But the goddess of fortune herself, with a lotus flower in her hand, is always ready to render service to the Supreme Lord.
Yeah. So in this one, I had an inclination to expand on the fact that Krishna, whose eyes are like lotus petals. because I thought that's a little break from that heavy, you know, it's just going so intense. It's very deep, this story, right? So let's give a little break. And then we talked about how Krishna's. So I asked them a question that, well, what parts of the body, Krishna's body is like a lotus, and they are so excited, right? Just about every part of Krishna's body is like a lotus, right? His eyes are like lotus petals. His navel is like a lotus, right? His feet like lotus. So many things like lotus, right? So they get a chance to, say something about that, right? And then, of course, you can go to the point that why is Krishna compared to a lotus? What is about a lotus, right? And then you can explain about a lotus. How it's such a beautiful flower, right? As soon as you see a lotus, you become peaceful, you become happy. And how a lotus, is so special because water doesn't stick to it, right? Even it grows in muddy water, but it's above that, is above the muddy water. So we have to be like that. We have to be in this world. Anyway, so that point can be discussed, right? So, yeah. So, and then of course, our devotees, swans and things like that. So you don't have to go very deep in this, but you go as much as you feel inspired, and then you move on. Okay. Yeah. Now, in this very, and our purports are so deep, right? In this very purport, Prabhupada is talking about permanent benediction is spiritual benediction, right? But material benediction is temporary, you know? Or it's in the first line of the purport. You don't have to even read too much to get that point. Suniti pointed out here that the benediction received from the Supreme Personality of Godhead and that received from the demigods are not on an equal level. In other words, one benediction is eternal, is permanent, and the other benediction from the demigods is temporary. Okay, and that becomes a great topic for discussion for children to interact. Ask them for examples. When is temporary benediction? What are examples of temporary benediction that did not last in the scriptures? Give me examples.
Hiranyakashipu.
Exactly. What else?
Even Ravana had also benediction.
All these demons, right?
Yeah.
Kansa, all these, they all died after working so hard. I mean, look at Hiranyakashipu. He did austerities for like thousands of years, thousand celestial years. What happened? He lost it. And he died. Having it was totally, it was mercilessly snatched away from him. Right? What is the use of all that hard work that he did? But what happened to Prahlad? He got it without working hard at all. Just in exchange for a little devotional service, he got everything, the entire kingdom, right? So that is the difference. And that is a very good example of material benedictions versus spiritual benediction that Prahlad got, an eternal residence in Vaikuntha, right? Where opulences, there's no end to opulences if one has the inclination to be there, right? Then what are the examples of material versus spiritual, or even material? You just gave the example of material.
Devavati's example, she wanted a son, and ultimately Kapila Muni was he has given the Sankhya, all the description of Sankhya Yoga and final teachings of Lord Kapila are also there to Devavati.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, Kardam Muni, he got a huge aerial mansion. Because he had pleased the Lord, and Devahuti had a desire to have better living facilities. Kardam Muni, mystically, he created that beautiful aerial mansion, right? Because Krishna wanted to please his devotee, and that devotee had some material desire, right? So he gives that, and that aerial mansion is just amazing because it's given by the pleasure of Krishna. Krishna is pleased with that devotee, and he's giving that benediction. He's giving that benediction because out of his pleasure because he's pleased with that devotee. So that plane, aerial mansion, had characteristics that even demigods didn't have in their airplanes. You know, the demigods also have airplanes where they can fly all over, but they are limited to their orbits. They're limited in many ways. What to compare with modern planes, so you can make that contrast, modern plane versus demigod planes versus Kardamuni's plane. He could go past his own orbits and he could go fly into any planetary orbits that he wanted to, right? Because that was a benediction that was given by Krishna himself. Okay, so some kind of benediction like that, which is given by the Lord himself, that is eternal, that's lasting. Of course, they both, the story goes on, right, where they actually, it was just a temporary thing for them. And Devahuti actually laments later on that, what did I ask for? Instead of getting the ultimate, I asked for some temporary things, and this way she turns towards, the ultimate knowledge which Kapila Muni gave to her, right? So anyway, but that point makes that point. But of course, this is more for older children. You can see that, the older children who can, if they haven't read the story, then obviously you may not even want to give that example except briefly, because they will not be able to understand so much. But I don't know. It depends on the set of children. I've given them that story in quite a deep way, and they, even though they haven't read it, but they appreciate it. So it depends what you feel about the mental makeup of the children and how far you want to go deep. You may not want to even bring this topic up because it's something that you don't feel comfortable with. You don't have to worry about it. There's so much in Bhagavatam, you know because you may not be comfortable because you may not have read it. It's all right. It's okay, because there's so much out there that is adequate, is satisfying. Okay, so just to give you some, I'm doing this just to give you more and more depth into what can be given to the children. How deep we can go, what we can offer them. I don't see much of a difference between their class and an adult class, frankly. For me, the pleasure is the same, I feel, because we are speaking to their soul. We are not speaking to their body, you know, and the soul is not, it's not young. It's deep, So in this way, of course, we don't want to go too much over their heads. We have to keep in mind the material situation, So just to give you some feel of how deep this goes. So anyway, one more verse which there's not much to discuss. Well, yeah, it is. Braj Balabi, you can read the last one and then we stop, okay?
Yes, ma'am. The great sage Maitreya continued, the instruction of Dhruv Maharaj's mother, Suniti, was actually meant for fulfilling his desired objective. Therefore, after deliberate consideration and with intelligence and fixed determination, he left his father's house.
Yeah. So the puppet is very revealing. And so we already discussed that point, right? Mere lamentation is useless. Anyway, so this is we already discussed that point. And the other point that comes across in this from this purport is that how to find, and that becomes a great point of discussion, is to find spiritual solution to material problems. In other words, and you ask them to give examples in modern world of how people solve their problems, materially, and whether and why that is not a solution. Quite a challenging thing, isn't it? How, like, for example, there's, one wants to be able to go across continents, so one invents a plane. But is the airplane a solution for that, for solving that problem? Has it become a solution? Has it created further problems? Well, there's pollution to deal with. In bigger countries like in America, going to the airport means 1 hour on the road because of traffic, right? Even in India, Bangalore, right?
Yes.
So it's created traffic problems. To get to the airport, it takes 1 hour, and there may be a 1 hour flight after that. to board the plane, it is like 2 hours when you finally get, right? So material problems create further problems. So how do we solve a material problem? We find a spiritual solution to it. Any material problem, they'll tell you many issues, many things. Can you think of something? A material problem? A challenge?
Hmm. Actually,
Disease.
in old days,
Mm,
um, this platform was not there. Ladies used to means actually this is not for kids actually.
mm.
So for whatever are coming in my mind, I'm telling. So, but we stand for long time, and because of long standing, there are problems which are related to lower extremities. They come up like joint pains are there, even varicose vein. So these problems are have started. Even the many electric machines
Yeah,
like
good. Very
uh,
nice. Yeah.
like food processor, so even grinder. So in
Yeah.
old days everything we have to do with our hand, and with we have to spend time on that. But
Yeah.
nowadays everything is quick, but
Yeah.
ultimately it has some
It's
impact
creative.
after some time. Even
It's
about food also same thing,
yeah.
fast food.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good example for children to
Hmm.
know fast food, right? Because everybody wants to have fast
Hmm.
food now. But that's creating serious health problems because they're not nutritious, right? So, okay, it solves the problem. Okay, you don't want to cook or you are in a rush. You have to go to, you can just eat and come home and the matter is done. But it's creating a lot of problems, a lot of health issues, right? Right?
Yes.
Yeah. This way, we can see that material problems, uh, to find material solutions to material problems is not the answer. It's to find spiritual solutions. What is the spiritual solution for fast food? Is to eat prasadam, right?
Hmm.
So, and that's lasting. So that becomes a nice point of discussion, that why material problems need spiritual solutions. It cannot be solved through material solutions. It just leads to further and further problems, right? We are trying to discover so many things to counteract disease, right? But there's some new disease coming up, right?
Yeah.
From right, so medical side. So like this, they start thinking about how we relate Bhagwatam to their practical life, to the life around them. How Suniti is suggesting a spiritual solution to material problems, and then you can ask them the choices that Dhruva could have had. Many choices, right? He could have, um, you know, uh, he could have just been angry and vowed, how to take revenge later on, or gotten angry or yelled, like there were many choices he had, right?
We can
but
do
he
our.
yeah, but he found a spiritual choice. Okay, so I think I'll stop here. It's
Yes.
been overtime. Yeah. Yeah. So thank you. Any other comments before we end the meeting? Okay.
So, Mataji, we have to stick with Bhagavatam only. We should not use outside like the other stories. There are so many stories are there. When we
Yeah.
start with one point, like envy also. So, from Chaitanya's Charitamrita story are there. Even we correlate with Bhagavad Gita. It's not directly from Bhagavatam, but while studying Bhagavad Gita, we have correlated those stories. So, those stories we don't have to tell
That
them.
you have Okay, the point that you have to remember, that you have to relate it to stories that children are familiar with, in some way. Like Arjuna, they may be familiar, so you
Yeah.
can bring a point like that. But you don't want to go into areas where they become lost. That's all I'm saying.
So, like Mahabharat story is there. Like, see, in Mahabharat, Hanumanji, uh, Bhim was very proud of his strength. So he
Mhm.
put just his tail and told him to just hold it up. So, and
Mhm.
Bhim couldn't hold it. So this Mahabharat story is there. Another one story is there about arrow. Arjuna was asking Hanumanji why Lord Ram made this bridge of stone. So he could have, he's a great archer, he could have make the this bridge of arrows also. See, I can make. And immediately he made, and then everything was, no, whole thing was, that was already means broken immediately. If Hanumanji put one leg on that, then immediately it was broken. So like this, there are many stories related to pride, envy, anger. So should we correlate with?
No, I would stick to Bhagavatam. I would
Okay.
stick to Bhagavatam, except for the very popular ones you can bring out. But but yeah, I would stick with Bhagavatam because then they can you can focus on one area where they can focus on. Otherwise, it becomes too big a subject, and that, like I said, the danger is losing them. That's the problem I see in this. Nothing wrong with that. In you know. Bring those things out, right? Those stories. But at some point, we're going to lose them because, after all, how much can they think? Like, for example, the same thing about pride and everything. So many stories are in the Bhagavatam about Indra's pride, right?
Yes.
And so many stories. We didn't even, I think there was one verse where I wanted to talk about that, and I didn't get around to doing it, and examples of Indra and things. So there's so much in Bhagavatam itself where you can bring out, okay? But the popular ones in Ramayana or something where you know that the children are totally familiar with,
Yeah.
totally,
Mhm.
then you can touch on those things, okay? But be very careful about bringing in so many. Ramayana is also full of stories, right? Mahabharata is full of stories.
Yes.
Yeah. So we want to bring the very, very common ones where they can relate with and they can get excited with. Okay.
Yeah. And Mataji, for one verse, is it how much time should be given? For sometimes for one verse can take like 10 minutes, 15 minutes also. Even 1 hour is also that, but will not give that much time. But
Mhm.
at least maximum, how much time should be spent on one verse?
There is no such thing as limiting so much time for one verse. You go along as it demands attention. In other words, I would go, all these things that I discuss should be done quite fast, quite quickly.
Okay. And
Yeah.
Mataji, should we have some planning like within this months we should cover this chapter or this part
Yeah.
of Bhagavatam like this?
I mean, it's nice to have some idea as to what we are doing, and but it may not be possible, especially if you're doing it the first time.
Hmm.
And if you make a plan like that, you may be frustrated because you really didn't have much to talk about certain things, and you wanted to move on, but you were stuck with the idea that I cannot go beyond that. I think the second time round, when you do this story with another group of children, I think you'll be more prepared for that. You'll have a
Okay.
very good idea. You'll say, okay, the first chapter, I think I need three classes. Okay. And you don't, like I said, don't want to make more than three classes for the first chapter. Okay. You don't want to do that. Now, the first session, you spend a lot of time, introducing each other. So that's understandable. So basically, you're finishing it in 2.5 classes. Okay.
Hmm.
And you don't want to do too much. Now, it may require, I remember the Narad Muni side also come, it may require 3 full classes, the first chapter, because it's exceptionally long chapter, right? So, but next time round, you have a very good idea. Okay, this is what I will take, so much time I will take, right? Then the
Hmm.
second chapter also, it's quite, but it doesn't take that long. Dhruva Maharaj leaves home, I mean, returns home. And then, of course, the yakshas fighting. I was doing the yaksha fighting in one class, a chapter. It went a lot faster because it's all that excitement. There's things happening, suspense is happening. So they just read through it. We don't need to stop. So I was doing one chapter in one class. You know, so it's so different from class to class. Right? And then, of course, the last chapter, chapter 12, Dhruv Maharaj going back to Godhead, that's again a very deep chapter. So again,
Hmm.
we need, I don't remember, but we need a couple classes at least. depending on how many verses we have. It could be more than that, but at least now you don't want to. There will be places where there's prayers and things, so you want to move quite fast on that. You have to keep reading them, and but not to say that all the prayers you have to go fast. There will be some that you want to talk about, right? But you just keep reading, and children love reading. Don't hesitate. Don't feel limited or bad if you don't have any discussion. If there's no point you want to raise, just let them keep reading it, and they feel a sense of satisfaction also when the chapter finishes, because then the realizations come. You see,
Yeah.
yeah. So you keep reading, and then you speak a little bit, and then you get them to. So suppose a class is full just reading. Well, you never end like that. And at the end of that class, you will want realizations where children feel satisfied, right? Because you would have talked a little bit early in the chapter, but then the prayers came, right? So you didn't know what to discuss in the prayers much. I always find something or the other, like I said, you don't have to go verse by verse in the prayers. There's some one particular point that really goes deep. Maybe Krishna is chastising the demigods in that prayer, or Krishna is, or Indra is openly praying to Krishna, well, kill my enemies, Krishna. And so we can talk about the mentality of the demigods, how they want is, the enemy is killed, whereas a pure devotee doesn't want that. So anyway, so things like that. When you see a point, you bring it up and you discuss, and then you move on, like that. But then towards the end of the class, if it's been a quiet class, you want realizations to compensate for that, so that every class becomes a dynamic class. And that really comes to experience. Don't worry about it. Just do your service nicely, pray to Krishna to do a nice job. You are you are speaking to the souls of so many little children, right? So you just do the best you can, and then Krishna will give all the inspiration and answers. Okay. Okay.
Yes, Mataji. Thank you so much for sparing your valuable time just to guide us. I'm
No,
so
well,
grateful to you, Mataji.
over there. Really. Okay. Thank you very much for accommodating this time for me. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam.
Thank you very much for giving us opportunity.
Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva cha patitanam papnebhyo vaishnavibhyo.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Dandavat.